the young man, Osman, had failed. He had so miserably failed. His quest had been a simple one, but daunting nonetheless. All he had to do was find the young, the offspring of the fierce beast, and crush their tails. Crippling the next generation would have guaranteed a prosperous future for his village, and would preserve the sacred lands of the northern Sahara. It was a deed the young hunters had been fulfilling for countless generations, way back to the time of the ancient pharaohs. But in the creature's caves, he had become lost. He'd panicked. He'd been brash. He'd found the young, the cruel offspring of an even crueler beast. But, out of fear, he'd done more than just cripple the cubs. He'd butchered them. What good would it be to cripple such creatures? He had realized. They would still arise to become deadly beasts of evil. Would it not be better to just slay them where they stand? They would do no better to the children and women I protect. My ancestors had been fools to allow any of them to live. He debated the point with his hunting partner. His partner, the cautious Assem, didn't think it was wise to do anything but what the elders had instructed. "Please," he had begged of Osman. "Not like this." Hungry for justice, starving for vengeance, Osman decided not to heed his friend. So he slaughtered them. Their blood stained the pale, sandstone walls of the cavern. Their carcasses lay strewn in pieces, shredded, eviscerated. And for a moment, the young man, the hunter Osman, was proud. Viciously proud. But then, while exiting the caves, he heard the cries of the mother, of the savage Manticore, and all of his pride wilted. It shriveled up inside of him, and the hunter felt as though he had died, for he knew that he was doomed. Had he not dallied, had he done his quick deed and been gone, then perhaps the mother would have spared him. Perhaps he could have escaped. Perhaps, had he just crippled the young, the Manticore wouldn't have pursued him so hastily. Perhaps there had been a reason his ancestors had let the cubs live. It pursued him through the caverns. His light never touched it, but he could hear it scuttling across the sides of the cave, gripping the walls with lion claws. There was a rustling in the wind as the creature furled and unfurled its ghastly, membranous wings, eager to fly, to soar. The hunter Osman saw sparks in the distance as the creature's dagger-like tail, full of the blackest venom, scraped against the cave's walls, as if the creature were sharpening its blade, making it ready to pierce his heart. Somewhere along the way, Osman lost Assem in the caverns, his light trailing down a different path. Down in the darkness, he met his fate. His gurgled screams eventually rebounded through every tunnel, reaching Osman's ears, devastating his heart. Scrambling, Osman made it out of the cave, and he only made it a few hundred meters across the desert plains before he was sure that the Manticore had made it as well. Free of confines, its wings spread and flogged into the air like a leaded tarp. It was a sound that quickly faded as the nightmare of legend rose into the sky, straight towards the heavens, undaunted to enter the so boldly approached the eyes of God. Osman felt his breaths quicken like cement in his lungs. There was nowhere to hide. Not for him anyways. Not the way the Manticore hid, stalking him from behind obsidian clouds. Osman didn't understand why the creature had allowed him to continue for so long. It could have struck him down in moments, in a final heartbeat. But instead, it hovered somewhere above, unseen. Its fury lingered in the air like static building before the lightning strikes. The Manticore could have swooped down upon him like the fiercest of eagles, rendering him where he stood. Its tail was said to be like that of the world's deadliest archer, able to fire its deadly sparks across distances of many, many miles. It was said that its wings could stir the heart of the air into the fiercest of storms. Yet, it did none of that. It was letting him run, letting him panic, letting it all simmer. Gazing down through its all-too-human eyes, Osmond knew that the Manticore was enjoying it. Osmond needed to find cover. To at least shield himself from the creature's gaze would grant him at least some peace. A moment at the very least to gather his courage once more. A moment to build a plan. And the good Allah finally looked upon him favorably. Across a cresting dune, there was refuge. An old passenger plane, large enough to seat maybe 20, lay half submerged in the ground. Surely the only landmark for miles around. One that, as the claw marks sheared into the wings would attest, did not come there by any act of man. Osmond doused his light, surrounding himself in darkness, hoping to temporarily blind the creature to his location. Climbing inside, Osmond pulled the hatch shut tightly, and he made his way towards the back of the plane. He gasped when he noticed that the passengers were still there, displaced about the cabin. Their flesh had fallen from their bones, and their bones now mutated into black crystal, like onyx, a side effect of the devastating Manticore toxins. Terrified, Osmond scuttled to the back of the cabin as quietly as he could, where he clutched his sword against his chest and waited. Boom! The airplane's metal shell shrieked and morphed as a giant weight crashed down on top of it. Claws retracted from inside the metal as the Manticore found its perch and began to move about the airplane's fuselage. Talons clacked on against the aluminum frame. The tail cracked through the air like a whip, darting from side to side, striking both sides of the plane with great force. The black, poisonous tip pierced through the craft as though it were nothing. The creature snarled. Inside, Osmond cowered. There was nothing he could do. He knew the creature's hide and fur held too thick for blades to pierce. He knew that any provocation would alert the beast to his presence. And, as far as he knew, he wasn't entirely sure if the beast had deduced he was inside the plane yet. It prowled about, but in no specific direction. It was searching. After many prayers, the weight was lifted from the top of the cabin, as the Manticore leapt back into the sky, crying like a hawk to continue its chase. Osmond, relieved, started to cry. Looking out the open windows, realizing any wandering eye could still see him, Osmond started to reposition himself within the cabin. He hid between two rows of seat, pulling one of the petrified corpses on top of himself to hide. Time passed, but not enough for the morning light to come, and Osmond began to hear a sound. It started in the distance, but grew and grew. It wasn't a worrying sound. Instead, it was the most welcome, if not a great deal comforting. "Please," he heard Assem pleading. "Where are you? Help me." Osmond rose quickly, gazing out the airplane's portals. He saw no one coming from the south, yet the voice kept coming. "Please," it begged weakly. "Please." The voice wasn't coming from the south. It was coming from the north. just outside the plane's rear emergency hatch. Osmond didn't hesitate, not even for a moment. He knew the longer that Assem was out there, the more attention he would draw. Attention that would draw the Manticore, just as their fathers had always said. And it would kill him. It would shred him with the claws of a lion. It would impale him with the tail of a scorpion. And it would maw him with the awful jaws of a monster, watching him through the awful eyes of a man. Quickly, Osmond pulled open the hatch, expecting to pull Assem inside, to safety. Instead, he learned quickly that their fathers hadn't told them all the abilities of the terrible Manticore. For, from its all-too-human lips, came the familiar voice of Osmond. A perfect imitation. A perfect smile. Please,